I never believed in destiny. When you grow up in an orphanage, fate feels like a cruel joke, told by people who've never known hunger or loneliness. For years, my world was 4 grey walls, shared bunk beds, and the constant echo of other girls crying in the dark. I was one of them once, but after a while I stopped. Tears didn't fix anything. They only made you weaker, or at least, that's what I told myself to survive. My name is Clara, and until I turned 22, I thought I was completely alone in this world. It was a Tuesday when everything changed. The sky was the color of steel, and the city buzzed with that cold kind of energy that makes you feel invisible. I was working 2 jobs, one at a coffee shop, one cleaning offices after hours. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me alive. Enough to keep me from going back to that place that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. I was halfway through mopping the floor when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something, a quiet voice inside me, said, "Answer, Miss Clara Hayes." A man's voice asked, professional and calm. "Yes, this is Mr. Carter. I'm a lawyer representing the estate of General Nathaniel Cross." I laughed softly, thinking it was a scam. "You've got the wrong person. I don't know any general." He hesitated before replying. "He knows you, and he's asked to see you before he passes." I remember freezing, the mop slipping from my hands, water splashing across the tiles. My heart pounded like I'd just been caught stealing something. "What did you say?" I asked. "He's terminally ill," the man continued. "He insists you come immediately. He says you're his daughter." His daughter. 2 words that hit like a freight train. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the reflection of my face in the puddle. The same tired eyes, the same loneliness carved into every line. Could it be true? After 22 years of silence, was the universe finally playing another cruel trick on me? That night, I barely slept. My mind was a storm. Hope battling anger, confusion wrestling with disbelief. I'd spent my whole life wondering, who left me at the orphanage gate in a torn blanket? I used to imagine a mother who couldn't afford to raise me, or a father who died heroically somewhere far away. But a general? That felt like a lie wrapped in a uniform. By morning, I made a decision. I needed answers, even if it meant reopening wounds. I'd spent years trying to forget. The lawyer's office was sleek and cold, filled with the quiet hum of money. Mr. Carter greeted me with a polite smile, his eyes scanning me, as though I were a riddle he was trying to solve. "You look just like her," he murmured. "Like who?" "Your mother," he said softly. "She was unforgettable." He handed me a manila folder. Inside were documents, my birth certificate, old photographs, and a letter sealed in wax. My hands shook as I broke the seal. The handwriting was neat, but shaky. "Clara, if you're reading this, it means I don't have much time left. I've made terrible mistakes, and you were the greatest one of all. Please come see me. I owe you the truth." Nathaniel Cross. For a long time, I couldn't breathe. The room felt smaller, my chest heavier. My entire life had been built on the belief that no one wanted me. And now, out of nowhere, the man who gave me away was asking to see me before he died. Mr. Carter gave me an address, a private military hospital 2 hours away. I could have walked out, thrown that letter into the nearest trash can, and pretended none of it existed. But I didn't, because as much as I wanted to hate him, I needed to know why. Why he left me. Why now? The drive was a blur. Rain streaked across the windshield as my mind spiraled through every possible scenario. Was he some heartless man trying to clear his conscience? Or was there something more? Something darker, buried beneath his guilt? When I arrived, the guard at the gate looked surprised. "You're Miss Hayes?" he asked, checking his clipboard. He's been waiting. The hallway leading to his room smelled of antiseptic and old secrets. Machines beeped steadily behind closed doors. Nurses moved like ghosts. And then, I saw him, frail, pale, but unmistakably commanding even in weakness. The general. His eyes opened as I entered. For a moment, silence stretched between us. 22 years of it. Then he smiled weakly. "You look like your mother," he whispered. "I wouldn't know," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "You made sure of that," he coughed, the sound ragged and painful. "I deserved that." "You deserve worse," I muttered. "Why now? Why after all this time?" He looked at me, tears glistening in those battle-hardened eyes. "Because I made enemies. Dangerous ones. And they're coming for everything I have. Everything that should have been yours." I blinked, taken aback. "Yours? I don't even know you." He reached for a drawer and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside were photographs, medals, and, to my shock, a faded picture of a woman holding a baby. Me. "Your mother tried to protect you," he said softly. "From them, and from me." I didn't understand. None of it made sense. But before I could ask more, a nurse entered, urging him to rest. He squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "Find Carter. He'll explain. And Clara. Don't trust anyone." Those were his last words to me. That night, he died. When I returned to the lawyer's office the next morning, everything felt off. The receptionist avoided my eyes. The lights flickered, and Mr. Carter's usual calm seemed cracked at the edges. He handed me a sealed envelope and whispered, "He left this for you. But please, Miss Hayes, be careful. They'll be watching now." Inside was a key. Old, heavy, engraved with a number, 47A, and a note. "The truth is in the past. But the past doesn't like to stay buried." I left the office with my heart racing. I didn't know what door the key opened, or who they were, but one thing was clear. My life was no longer mine. The story I'd been told since birth was a lie, and the man I'd just buried might have dragged me into something much bigger than an apology. That night, as I sat in my small apartment, I stared at the key under the flickering light. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger. A woman on the edge of something dangerous. I thought of the general's last words again. Don't trust anyone. I didn't know it yet, but those words would save my life. Because within days, people would start following me. My phone would ring with silence. And the truth about who I really was, and why he gave me up, would destroy everything I thought I knew. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the floor, every flicker of streetlight outside my window made my pulse quicken. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. Maybe it was paranoia, or maybe it was the general's warning echoing in my mind. Don't trust anyone. The next morning, I called Mr. Carter again, but his office line was disconnected. No voicemail, no forwarding number, just a flat, cold tone. My gut twisted. Something was wrong. I decided to visit the address on the envelope again. When I got there, the entire law office was dark. The glass door was cracked, and yellow tape fluttered in the wind. A police car was parked outside. My heart dropped. I approached one of the officers standing by the door. "Excuse me, what happened here?" He glanced at me, then at his notes. "Break-in, 1 fatality inside. You can't go in. Fatality." My voice shook. Who died?" He looked uncomfortable. "Carter." "The lawyer," I froze. My fingers went numb. He was the only person who seemed to know what was going on. And now he was gone. Murdered. My stomach churned as I remembered his last words. Be careful. They'll be watching. For the rest of the day, I walked around in a haze. Fear clung to me like static. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting someone to be there. And more than once, I swore I saw the same black sedan in my rearview mirror. By evening, I was sitting in my apartment again, staring at the key. 47A. It had to mean something. A locker. A safe deposit box. I searched online for storage facilities near the hospital and found one with numbered units. Old, built decades ago. and it had a Unit 47A. I didn't think. I just grabbed my jacket and left. The storage facility was on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place that looked forgotten by time. Rows of metal doors, paint peeling, streetlights flickering. I walked through the silence, clutching the key so tightly my palm hurt. When I found 47A, my breath caught. The padlock was new, recently changed. That didn't make sense, unless someone had already been here. Still, I tried the key. It turned smoothly, like it had been waiting for me. Inside was a single metal cabinet. No boxes, no papers, just a small file folder sitting neatly in the middle. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were photographs, some old, some recent. In every picture, there was one constant: a woman. Dark hair, cold smile, sharp eyes. Sometimes, she stood beside the general at official events, sometimes alone. One photo made my blood run cold. She was standing next to a man I recognized, Mr. Carter, and behind them, me, a blurred figure, half hidden by a crowd. I flipped to the last page, a document with a red stamp, Project Seraph. Below it, a list of names, including my mother's, my father's, and mine. I didn't understand, but I knew one thing. Whoever this woman was, she was part of something dangerous. And if Carter was dead, she might be next on my list. Before I could leave, headlights swept across the row of units. I ducked behind the cabinet, heart pounding. A car door slammed. Footsteps echoed. Deliberate, heavy, confident. A man's voice muttered something into a radio. Then the beam of a flashlight slid across the floor, just inches from my shoes. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't find me. The light lingered, then moved away. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps faded. When I finally dared to peek outside, the car was gone, but a folded note had been slipped under my door. "You shouldn't have opened it, Clara." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about inheritance or guilt. This was about survival. Someone wanted whatever was in that file buried forever, and they were willing to kill for it. I took the documents and ran. For the next few days, I hid, changed hotels, paid cash, burned my phone. I went through the file piece by piece. The more I read, the clearer it became that my father hadn't just been a general. He'd been involved in covert operations, black budgets, and experiments under the codename Seraph. And my mother had been one of the scientists involved. But there was something worse. A classified report detailed a cover-up. One that mentioned my mother's death as terminated for security reasons. Terminated, like she was disposable. The rage that had been simmering inside me for years finally ignited. I wasn't just an orphan. I was the daughter of a man who had used his power to bury the truth, and a woman who'd been silenced for knowing too much. And now they wanted me gone too. For a while, I didn't know what to do. I was scared, alone. But fear has a funny way of turning into focus when you've got nothing left to lose. I started with the woman in the photographs. After days of searching, I found her name, Margaret Vale. She'd been the general's aide, but more importantly, she was the executor of several of his off-the-record projects. She now ran a private defense firm worth millions, and something in my gut told me she was the one who'd had Carter killed. I needed proof, and I needed a plan. I took a job as a janitor at one of her subsidiary buildings, a logistics company downtown. Nobody looked twice at the cleaning staff. I spent 2 weeks memorizing security patterns, badge rotations, camera placements. Every night I'd whisper to myself, "You wanted the truth, Clara. Now take it." It was during one of those shifts that I found it. A locked archive room, secured with an access panel. The code changed daily, but the guard who updated it kept his notes in his wallet. One night, I slipped it out while he was smoking, memorized the digits, and returned it before he noticed. That same night, I went back. entered the code, and opened the door. Rows of file cabinets, metal, cold, endless. I scanned labels until one caught my eye. Seraph, phase thin free. My heart thundered as I pulled it out. Inside were detailed financial transfers. Millions diverted to offshore accounts connected to Vale's company. Attached were personal letters between her and my father, and one line in his handwriting made me freeze. If anything happens to me, our secret dies with her, my mother. I turned another page and gasped. A picture of my mother, alive, dated 2 years after the official record of her death. I stumbled back, dizzy. All those years, I'd believed she was gone. But if this was real, she might still be alive. Before I could process it, I heard footsteps. 2 guards entered, talking casually. I ducked behind the shelves, clutching the file. One of them said, "Vale's getting nervous. She wants the Hayes girl handled before things leak." The other laughed. "Handled? She's just some orphan. Won't last long." My blood went cold. They were talking about me. When they left, I grabbed what I could and ran. I didn't stop until I reached a cheap motel outside town. My reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror looked different now. Sharper, colder. The girl who used to beg for answers was gone. What stared back was a woman with a purpose. That night, I made a list. Every name connected to Seraph. Every account Vale used. Every ally my father once trusted. I was done running. If they wanted me silenced, they were going to learn what it felt like to be hunted. I spent the next week setting everything in motion. Hacked accounts, leaked documents to journalists anonymously, planted breadcrumbs in military records, pointing directly to Vale's firm. And while chaos spread in their ranks, I planned my next move. Face-to-face confrontation. She destroyed my family. She erased my mother. She killed the only man who tried to warn me. And she thought I'd disappear quietly. She was about to learn exactly how wrong she was. Because I wasn't just the orphan anymore. I was the weapon they created. And this time, I was turning it on them. I found her where the men in suits thought I'd never look. Under the bright lights of Margaret Vale's charity gala. It felt wrong. Silk and crystal chandeliers draped over a wound that still bled. But I needed the world to watch when she fell. I'd spent the last week sewing the pieces together. The leaked files, the offshore transfers, the secret footage Carter had hidden in Unit 47A. I'd sent copies to an investigative reporter I trusted anonymously. I'd mapped the building's security from a janitor's closet. And I'd made sure every phone in the room would receive one message at the exact same second. I stepped into the ballroom wearing a dress that made me feel like armor. My hands trembled for a heartbeat, then steadied. This wasn't about looking pretty. It was about being seen. She was as I'd expected. Composed, laughing, moving through the room like a queen. Up close, her smile didn't reach her eyes. She recognized me the second I crossed her path. I saw her flinch. That small human crack was everything, Ms. Vale. I said softly, letting others drift away like background noise. Do you remember the General's last words? He told me not to trust anyone. Her laugh was cultured. So dramatic. What do you want, Clara? Another favor. More gratitude. I didn't answer right away. I let the chandelier light pool on the tablecloth. I thought about the orphanage smells, about the key cold in my palm at midnight, about Carter's warning and the sound of boots that chased me through the storage aisles. I thought about my mother's smile in a photograph tagged with a date that didn't exist in her death file. I thought about all the times I'd whispered myself into sleep and believed that the world could never come back for me. Then I did the only thing I'd planned for. I hit send. Phones buzzed like swarms. Notifications exploded. A dozen cameras swung toward the stage where Vale pretended to give a speech. On the giant screen behind her, the one used for charity slides, the video I'd stolen from her server played. At first it was a dim hallway, Then her voice, crisp and unbothered, ordering someone to make sure Carter understands we don't leave signatures. Then footage of men in masks. Then a frame I recognized. Carter's face, stunned, collapsing in his office. The room changed in a breath. Glasses fell. Conversations stopped mid-laugh. People who'd applauded minutes ago now stared like they'd been struck. Margaret Vale's face drained of blood. Her fingers fanned her throat as if to make sure she could still breathe. "This is," she started, but the video continued. Emails I'd leaked scrolled in the sidebar. Transfers to shell companies. Orders stamped serif. Names of labs where civilians had been tested and silenced. The reporter I'd fed had already begun live streaming. People moved, some toward the exits, others toward the screen. Security officers in the room hesitated. Vale's money bought ships of loyalty, but not silence in front of evidence. A uniformed investigator I hadn't met before lifted his badge and approached her. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, murder, and violations of national security," he said, voice flat. It felt unreal to hear the words come through the lip of a government badge I'd only seen in files. Vale looked at me. Hate, fear, something brittle and raw. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "You have no idea what you're doing." I thought of Carter's hand on my note. "Be careful." I thought of the little girl who learned to swallow her tears. I thought of every small indignity that had shaped me into someone who would not be invisible anymore. "I know exactly what I'm doing," I said. "I know who you are. I know what you did to my mother, and I know who paid to keep you safe." They cuffed her. People murmured. Cameras flashed. Vale's empire, glossy ads and glossy lies, started to unravel like a cheap seam. She tried to smirk on the way out, and for a second, I almost expected her to turn the story on me. But her handcuffed wrist was small and human. She was just a woman without protection now. The release wasn't cinematic. There were no fireworks, no triumphant music. My knees went weak. My chest loosened like a knot finally untied. I cried, but not out of triumph, more like a pressure valve opening. Tears tasted like metal and rain. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath for 22 years until I exhaled. After Vale's arrest, the pieces fell fast. Reporters dug deeper. Other whistleblowers came forward. Investigators reopened the file on serif. Offshore accounts were frozen. Names were dragged into the light. My life, the maps of my grief and loss, became evidence that compelled people to act. On a grey afternoon a week later, I was led into a sterile room, not a courtroom, a small office with blinds half closed. I sat across from a woman whose hair was threaded with silver and whose eyes were shockingly like mine. For a long moment, we only breathed. "Clara." She said my name like a prayer and a confession. "I thought I had protected you." I was wrong. My throat closed. The woman in front of me was smaller than the photographs suggested, but steadier. The lines around her mouth held both sorrow and iron. "Why?" I asked. "Why fake your death? Why leave me?" She reached out. Her hands trembled in the same way mine had when I'd opened Mr. Carter's letter. They threatened me. They said if I didn't disappear, they'd take you. I thought distance would keep you safe. She laughed once, a sound like broken glass. I didn't know they'd erase me from the records. I didn't know they'd call it termination. Everything clicked into place, like maps folding back into one another. Protection, secrecy, the general's guilt, Carter's fear. The files I'd found were meant to be breadcrumbs. An insurance policy he'd hidden with people he thought he could trust. They failed. You left, I said, each syllable a small stone. You left me. Her hand found mine. It was warm. I left to make sure you could live. I chose the only option I thought would keep you breathing. I wanted to scream. I wanted to beat her. I wanted to demand every lonely night back. But the truth, messy and human, was here in front of me. A woman who had made a terrible choice to save a child. A woman who had paid for it every day since. We didn't get closure that day. There was grief and anger and the awkward fumbling of two strangers trying to be mother and daughter. But we also got truth, and truth, once spoken aloud, has a weight that reorders things. When I walked out of the building that evening, the city smelled like wet asphalt and possibility. I had lost a childhood, but I had found a path forward. I had turned my fear into a thing that forced people to reckon. Revenge, I learned, wasn't always a shout. Sometimes it was a slow, expert unspooling of a lie until the world finally saw the rot underneath. Sometimes it was a file from a rusty locker, a video on a ballroom screen, and the patience to wait until the timing was right. If you've ever wanted someone who hurt you to face what they did, to see the mirror for once, know this: justice rarely looks like the movies. It looks like stubbornness, like quiet planning, like making sure the evidence sits where it can't be ignored. If this story gave you chills, hit the like button, share it with someone who loves a good payback, and tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen? And if you haven't already, subscribe for more stories of hidden truths and the people who dig them up, because sometimes the world needs a small, steady hand to flip the switch. Sometimes that hand is mine.